His name was Tyler Harrison, and he had lived his entire 26 years believing that his father's position as the most respected judge in the county meant that he was untouchable. Judge William Harrison had served on the bench for over 25 years, earning a reputation for fairness, integrity, and unwavering commitment to justice that made him one of the most admired legal figures in the state. But what the public didn't know was that his son Tyler had been using his father's name and influence to escape consequences for increasingly serious crimes since he was a teenager. It started small when Tyler was 16 and got caught shoplifting expensive electronics from a department store. The store manager was ready to press charges until he learned that the boy's father was Judge Harrison, at which point the incident was quietly forgotten and Tyler walked away without even a warning on his record. The pattern continued through high school and college, with Tyler accumulating arrests for underage drinking, drug possession, assault, and vandalism that all mysteriously disappeared from his record thanks to prosecutors and police officers who didn't want to create problems with one of the most powerful judges in their jurisdiction. Tyler learned early that his father's reputation was like a shield that could protect him from any consequences, no matter how serious his actions became. By the time he was in his early 20s, Tyler was living a lifestyle funded by his father's success, but characterized by recklessness, entitlement, and complete disregard for the law. He drove expensive cars while intoxicated, started fights in bars knowing that charges would be dropped, and used drugs openly because he believed his father's position made him immune to prosecution. His friends and associates enabled his behavior because they enjoyed the protection that came with being part of Tyler's circle, knowing that Judge Harrison's influence extended to covering up their crimes as well. Judge Harrison was aware that his son had problems, but had no idea how extensive Tyler's criminal activities had become, or how many serious crimes had been covered up by officials who were afraid to prosecute the judge's son. Tyler learned early that his father's reputation was like a shield that could protect him from any consequences, no matter how serious his actions became. By the time he was in his early 20s, Tyler was living a lifestyle funded by his father's success, but characterized by recklessness, entitlement, and complete disregard for the law. He drove expensive cars while intoxicated, started fights in bars knowing that charges would be dropped, and used drugs openly because he believed his father's position made him immune to prosecution. His friends and associates enabled his behavior because they enjoyed the protection that came with being part of Tyler's circle, knowing that Judge Harrison's influence extended to covering up their crimes as well. Judge Harrison was aware that his son had problems, but had no idea how extensive Tyler's criminal activities had become, or how many serious crimes had been covered up by officials who were afraid to prosecute the judge's son. Tyler learned early that his father's reputation was like a shield that could protect him from any consequences, no matter how serious his actions became. By the time he was in his early 20s, Tyler was living a lifestyle funded by his father's success, but characterized by recklessness, entitlement, and complete disregard for the law. He drove expensive cars while intoxicated, started fights in bars knowing that charges would be dropped, and used drugs openly because he believed his father's position made him immune to prosecution.
The night that changed everything began like so many others, with Tyler and his friends bar-hopping through the wealthy part of town while consuming dangerous amounts of alcohol and cocaine. Tyler had just received a new BMW as an early birthday gift from his father and was eager to show off its performance capabilities to his companions. By midnight, Tyler was severely intoxicated and high on cocaine, but insisted on driving to another club across town, despite his friends' half-hearted attempts to convince him to call a ride service. Tyler's friends had seen him drive in similar conditions dozens of times before, and knew that even if he got pulled over, his father's name would protect him from any serious consequences. As they drove through downtown, Tyler was speeding and weaving between lanes, while his passengers laughed and encouraged his reckless behavior. He ran 2 red lights without slowing down and nearly collided with several other vehicles while showing off by taking turns at dangerous speeds. His friends were recording videos of Tyler's driving on their phones, treating his reckless endangerment of other people as entertainment, rather than recognizing the deadly situation he was creating. At the intersection of 5th and Main Street, Tyler approached a red light where a family of 4 was stopped in their sedan, waiting patiently for the signal to change so they could continue home from their daughter's piano recital. 8-year-old Emma Chen was asleep in the back seat next to her 10-year-old brother Michael, while their parents David and Lisa Chen discussed their daughter's performance and made plans for the following weekend. They had no warning that Tyler was approaching the intersection at over 70 miles per hour with no intention of stopping for the red light. The collision was devastating and instantaneous. Tyler's BMW slammed into the passenger side of the Chen family's vehicle with such force that it spun their car completely around and sent it crashing into a storefront. The impact killed Lisa Chen instantly and left her husband David in critical condition with massive internal injuries and brain trauma. Emma Chen died at the scene from her injuries, while 10-year-old Michael was rushed to the hospital where he fought for his life in pediatric intensive care. Tyler and his passengers survived the crash with relatively minor injuries because his expensive car was equipped with advanced safety features that protected the occupants during high-speed collisions. When police and paramedics arrived at the scene, they found Tyler stumbling around the wreckage, clearly intoxicated and showing no concern for the family he had just destroyed. His first words to the responding officers were about calling his father, rather than asking about the condition of his victims. Tyler's friends immediately began trying to establish an alibi story, claiming that Tyler hadn't been driving and that one of them had been behind the wheel when the accident occurred. But there were too many witnesses and too much physical evidence to support their lies, including traffic camera footage that clearly showed Tyler in the driver's seat at the moment of impact. When Tyler was arrested at the scene, he repeatedly demanded that officers contact his father and insisted that there had been some kind of mistake that could be easily resolved once Judge Harrison was involved in the situation. The responding officers knew exactly who Tyler's father was, but the severity of the crash and the number of fatalities meant that even Judge Harrison's influence couldn't make this case disappear quietly. The story made front-page news the next morning, with headlines about the judge's son killing 2 members of a local family in a drunk driving accident. Judge Harrison learned about his son's arrest by reading the newspaper rather than receiving a phone call from law enforcement, which indicated how serious the charges were and how determined prosecutors were to pursue the case regardless of Tyler's family connections. For the first time in Tyler's life, his father's reputation and influence were not enough to protect him from the consequences of his actions.
The district attorney announced that Tyler would be prosecuted to the full extent of the law for vehicular homicide, driving under the influence, and reckless endangerment charges that could result in decades in prison if he were convicted. Judge Harrison recused himself from any involvement in the case and publicly stated that his son would receive no special treatment because of their family relationship. Judge Harrison's colleagues and the legal community watched carefully to see whether he would use his influence to help his son escape justice, or whether his commitment to the law would extend to allowing his own child to face the consequences of his crimes. The judge was devastated by the loss of life his son had caused and struggled with the conflict between his love for Tyler and his lifelong dedication to upholding justice for all victims of crime. He knew that any attempt to interfere with the prosecution would destroy his reputation and undermine everything he had worked to accomplish during his career on the bench. Tyler's trial began 6 months after the accident in a courthouse where his father had presided over thousands of cases during his distinguished career. The irony was not lost on anyone that Tyler Harrison, who had spent years using his father's name to escape justice, was now facing the same legal system that his father had devoted his life to serving.
Judge Harrison attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery behind the prosecution team rather than supporting his son's defense, sending a clear message about where his loyalties lay when forced to choose between family and justice. The evidence against Tyler was overwhelming and undeniable. Traffic cameras showed him speeding and running red lights immediately before the crash. Toxicology reports confirmed dangerous levels of alcohol and cocaine in his system, and multiple witnesses testified about his reckless driving throughout the evening. The prosecution presented videos that Tyler's friends had recorded of his dangerous driving, evidence that Tyler's defense team tried desperately to suppress, but could not keep from the jury. Most damaging was testimony from survivors and family members of the victims, including David Chen, who had recovered enough from his injuries to describe the moment when Tyler's car destroyed his family. During the sentencing phase of the trial, Judge Harrison was called as a character witness for his son, creating one of the most traumatic moments in the courthouse's history, as a respected judge testified about his child's need for accountability rather than mercy. Judge Harrison's testimony was brief and heartbreaking, as he explained that he loved his son but could not ask for leniency in a case where Tyler's choices had taken innocent lives. He acknowledged that he had failed as a father by not recognizing the extent of Tyler's problems, and stated that he supported whatever sentence the court deemed appropriate based on the severity of the crimes. Judge's son thought he was above the law until his father sentenced him, and that sentencing would mark the end of Tyler's belief that family connections could protect him from the consequences of his actions. In an unprecedented move, the chief judge assigned Judge Harrison to preside over his own son's sentencing hearing, forcing him to choose publicly between his role as a father and his duty as a judge. The courtroom was packed with media, legal professionals, and members of the community who came to witness whether Judge Harrison would show favoritism to his son or demonstrate that justice truly was blind to family relationships. When Tyler stood before his father for sentencing, he finally seemed to understand that his lifetime of escaping consequences was over, and that even his father's love could not save him from the justice he deserved. Judge Harrison looked at his son with tears in his eyes, but spoke with the firm voice of a judge who had sworn to uphold the law regardless of personal cost. He sentenced Tyler to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for the first 15 years, explaining that the severity of the crimes and Tyler's complete lack of remorse required the maximum sentence allowed under state law. The judge's final words to his son were that he hoped Tyler would use his time in prison to understand the value of the lives he had taken and to become the man his victims' families deserved him to be. Tyler was led away in handcuffs, finally facing the consequences that had been delayed but never eliminated by his father's position and reputation. Judge Harrison retired from the bench 6 months after sentencing his son, unable to continue his career after the personal tragedy that had forced him to choose between family loyalty and judicial integrity. Today, Tyler Harrison is serving his sentence in state prison, where his father's reputation provides no protection and where he must face the reality of his crimes without the shield of family influence that had protected him for so many years. David Chen eventually recovered from his physical injuries, but continues to struggle with the loss of his wife and daughter, while Michael Chen survived his injuries but will carry physical and emotional scars for the rest of his life. Judge Harrison's decision to sentence his own son demonstrated that true justice requires judges to set aside personal relationships and family loyalty when the law demands accountability, even when that accountability comes at the highest personal cost a parent can pay.